Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Shelby Diak, and welcome to the Diak Kitchen, where many recipes are made and many happy mouths fed. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make tortillas for one of two reasons. One, because it shows that you have an independent skill in cooking for yourself for future references, and two, because where we come from northern New Mexico, making tortillas is a sign equal to giving a present, say for birthdays or for Christmas. Now, making tortillas isn't really that hard, but I'm going to show you how to do it in case you've never made them before. So what you'll need for making tortillas is flour, baking powder, any type of shortening, and some salt, and some water to start forming our dough. You'll also need a plethora of measuring cups, a clean surface, right now I'm using a cutting board, and a rolling pin, and a hot skillet. So this recipe that I'm making today is good for 3 dozen tortillas. So you can either shorten some of these measurements or add some depending on how much you want to make. So let's begin. First step, you're going to measure out your flour, which I've already done in this large bowl. I have 5 cups here. And then to that, I'm going to add a teaspoon of salt. I'm going to do that right now. That should be good. And then I'm going to add a tablespoon of baking powder. So now that you have your dry ingredients all in this big bowl, you're going to start mixing it. Now I suggest you do it by hand because once we start making our actual dough with water and shortening, it's going to get a little hard to do it with mixers. So I'm just going to give this a real quick mix, not too thorough, just get it all incorporated. Make like a little well in the middle like this. To that I'm going to add our shortening. Now, shortening looks kind of like frosting, but don't eat it because it's not. It's kind of like the grease or the lard, and it helps kind of bind everything together like water. So to that, I'm going to measure out 3/4 of a cup. Just squash it down in there, make sure it's all packed. And I add it in here. Now I'm going to start mixing this by hand. Now it's going to start looking really clumpy and dry, but just trust me, it's going to get better as we add water. Just mix this. And you kind of want to do this by hand for another reason, because if you did this with beaters, you'd have flour flying all over you and it'd get really messy, and trust me, from past experience, cleaning up a kitchen covered in flour is not fun. So now you should have something like this. It's very crumbly. You can see that all the shortening's kind of mixed in. You kind of have these lumps going on. So to this, you're going to start adding your water. Now, your water doesn't have to be measured to a certain cup or tablespoon or teaspoon. You just need enough to start making your dough. And it's important that you have warm to hot water, but it all depends on how hot you can stand. So just start adding little bits at a time. Mix it with your hand. Work all your flour into it. A little more. What I do to mix my tortilla batter or dough is to just go around the bowl like this and press down. Kind of like how you would like a spoon, but not really with your hand. Mix a little more, and more water. Now, for my batter, I've added, let's see, I measured out 2 cups of hot water, and my dough is already starting to form itself, but it's still really sticky. As you can see, it's sticking to my hands. So we're almost where we want it to be, but not quite, so just add a little more water. Now at this stage, you have a ball of dough, but it's still, if you feel it and you see on your hand, it's just kind of sticky. You don't want to add any more water. You kind of just want to go over here to your flour, take off the lid, and add about a tablespoon or so, just a little bit, just so it doesn't stick to your hand. There we go. Now you should have something like this. It's a dough, it's kind of sticky, but it's not sticking in your hands. It's molded to itself. And you can kind of form it. Get all the rest of this off of my hands. You want to make sure that any scrap of dough that you have, either in your bowl or on your hands, gets mixed into the bigger dough ball, because you don't want to, one, you don't want to waste it, and two, because it kind of helps the dough to have all of its parts mixed in, and it just helps it to rise better and function better. Add a little more flour to this side. So now with your dough, you're going to start and portion it out. So I make mine not a golf ball size, but it all really depends on how big you want your tortillas to be, because we are going to flatten them out, so it's going to make them longer and wider. So I want to make mine about a golf ball size, and then to make them into discs, I'm going to start by flying them out of my hands like this, and then transfer it to a clean surface. What I have here is a cutting board, which I've already floured. Smash my dough into the flour, and then use my rolling pin, which I have also already floured so it doesn't stick to my dough, and start rolling this dough out. Now it's important to roll out your dough so that way you can get all the air bubbles out, so you don't have any cavities in your dough when it's cooking. Not that that's a bad thing, but tortillas are usually flat. You want them to stay flat. You don't want them to rise like a cake and have air bubbles. So then I'm going to take my dough and gently pass it back and forth and roll it out again. But this time I'm rolling the opposite side of the dough. That way I get both sides so there's no air pockets on either side. As you can see, my tortilla isn't the perfect circle, but that's okay because we've achieved the flatness that I want. So now we're going to take my dough and transfer it to my skillet. Now my skillet is already preheated, and it's just hot enough where it can cook my dough, but it's not like fry it hot and it's not too cold. So I'm just going to plop it on here, move it around a little bit. And for tortillas, it usually takes about a minute on both sides, but it really depends on how big your tortilla is and how hot your skillet is. And I recommend that if you're really young, to get an adult to help you with this step so you won't burn yourself. So right now my tortilla is cooking, and as you can see it has all these air bubbles in it, which means I didn't flatten it out enough, but that's okay because it's still going to taste the same. And for the purposes of this video and me not burning myself, I'm going to use a spatula. So see how my tortilla has these brown little flecks on it? It's not really burnt, but it's still like that nice golden brown that you want. That just means that it's cooking properly and that it's getting enough heat on the whole surface of the tortilla to where it's not just burning in specific spots. So See, and that's usually what you want to look for in a perfect cooked tortilla, is that it's not burnt, but it has these perfect little circles on it. Just continue to flip it like a pancake, making sure that you're not burning it on either side. And then once you're done, you should have this perfect little tortilla. Now, with this, you can start making as many as you want. You can even do 2 of them at a time if you're brave enough. But this is the step-by-step process of how to do tortillas. My name is Shelby Diap, and I hope that you learned something, or at least got a good meal out of it. Bye!